Welcome back to the podcast and our second installment of Holodecks today with Danger Dave, myself, Rob Omnisci, and our Trexpert Neil. Entertainment, the final legal thing we're going to cover. As we said, the holodeck could be an amplification of everything we already experience on the internet. It has been said by people, more than a few times, that the internet is for porn. I think we would have to acknowledge that pornography and adult entertainment would possibly be, unless it was tightly controlled somehow or forbidden by some other authority, that would be a pretty big thing on the holodeck. This is where I'm the only one talking.
This is,
in Star
this
Trek,
is the touchy universe.
In Star Trek, I don't think they ever classified the scenarios as porn per se. They just
they were very clever to kind of dance around some of it.
Quarks.
The Next Generation, they did.
The Next Generation, it was like I said, a lot of the time, Star Trek is from the perspective of the higher echelon of society, where you don't see what the dregs of society are doing. With DS9, you have Quarks. Quarks has holosuites. Holosuites 99.9% of the time were being used for sexual gratification.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that would be how the underbelly of society would use them.
And Quark would be
underbelly? I think you'd be dropping the underbelly. Again, we're talking modern society.
Well, look at modern society. I mean,
we have just had a billionaire get busted for possibly indulging in sexual interaction in a massage parlor in Florida.
It has been said that possibly 60% of the male American public has become addicted at some point to internet pornography.
Yes.
That being said, I absolutely believe that even at the best of intentions, the technology will eventually digress into total chaos. And most of the time, and I've said this before, I mean, once the technology comes out, we figure out, can we kill somebody with it or can we propagate with it? And I'm sure this would fall under those means too.
I think that's just a given. If you have again, we talked about the ability to perfectly replicate any scenario, perfect entertainment, that's certainly something that a lot of people are interested in. Not exclusive to any race, gender, anything.
I think beyond the pornographic aspect of it, there is the potential of losing yourself in one of these fantasy worlds.
We're actually going to get into that in the bad stuff of the technology. We're just touching on this for now. Because we've already talked entertainment-wise.
Casual use. Riker would be a casual user in this situation.
Right. I think he would be the example of how somebody could use it in...
I don't have a girlfriend right now. I
just need to blow off some steam. People are...
Correct.
But... he keeps it to himself.
Correct. It's not an issue. It's simply a tool.
Picard, I just need 2 minutes in the holodeck. Just leave me alone.
See, the theory I've kind of gone under for a long time in terms of Star Trek, especially at the long term, is that they probably experience some sort of hormone control, something that they take in that cuts down on those urges or impulses that could distract them from the course of their duties, especially when you have access to something like the holodeck, but people go to concerts and perform Shakespeare and things like that. That was just always my personal suspicion of how that explained how people were a bit tamer there. But it's also cultural, a lot of it, certainly. As Neil has touched on numerous times, a kind of a higher standard for human interactions and behaviors. So I think we can leave that behind. We know how this would end up.
Right.
Just from anybody browsing on the internet for a little bit is going to brush against this.
Correct.
So, obviously, the other types of entertainment that we are familiar with, even what we're doing here, podcasting. You have an infinite media. Just walk into a room, start talking, and you can instantly control the message, how you look, how you sound, master-level studios and qualities like that. You just go in and blather all you want and come out looking like it's a finished product by some, high-tech professional. Movie making with holodeck would be absolutely incredible.
Holodeck. Theater creation, writing telenovelas, writing different kinds of scenarios, being able to place yourself in those scenarios would definitely be a big business.
You could take Star Wars at a certain point, and then you could maybe restructure it to go a different direction.
Correct. You could write it so that Anakin wasn't so whiny. You're right.
Yeah.
And
You
since
could
you're the
wreck- you could-
director,
you
you could fix everything.
You could
go in.
retcon literally every movie you didn't like the ending to.
Anakin didn't turn to the dark
Fanfic
side.
would be incredible with this. It would be absolutely. However,
'Cause
in
those-
our current society, there would be some ironclad controls on that because of copyright.
Copyright
issues.
infringement would limit, and I think that's
Well-
part of the reason why technology is so prevalent in the future is because those kind of regulations don't exist.
Right.
It's technology becomes more for the people and not for the purpose of making money.
Well, I think though, if this technology were around, I think big companies like Paramount or Disney, Fox, all those, they would utilize that, and
totally.
and they
As an
would
extension of
They
their
privatize
product,
it
yeah.
instead of it would immediately obviate all of your need for just about anything.
wanna
Your
be part of
modeling,
the-
CG? It's all there in the holodeck.
Marvel Cinematic Universe. You can, and they would probably, it'd probably cost a lot, but hey, they'd probably allow the computer to program, let's say you didn't want Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and
You want
let's
Andy
say
Dick as Iron Man.
yeah, right. You could get Andy Dick as Iron Man, and you're playing
Can
Captain
you imagine
America.
what we would do if we had that? We could just go in and say, okay, you pick a movie, you pick who the lead is, I'll pick the plot twist, and we'll watch our mad creation go. Would that not be a hoot?
I think that would be something to see.
That'd be incredible.
I think it would be great. That kind of gaming would be wonderful.
Oh my gosh! So, come on, somebody invent this quick while we're still alive. But yeah, applying this to modern day, clearly, if anybody could afford to have a holodeck, if we're assuming that this technology is available so that you or I could walk down to the holodeck suite and rent some time, because it would be privatized, the theaters would be some of the first to grab onto that because that's technology they're already in bed with. So all of a sudden, all you have to do is pitch it, and then if the AI is up to it, as we assume they would have to be, anybody with a great idea could come in and boom, make the movie you want. And
I think ultimately
you would probably try to sell that experience. That's what you'd be doing, is selling experiences to the movie theaters as much as anything.
Correct. I think ultimately, initially, in a burgeoning sense, the technology would be strictly written to where it wouldn't be as interactive as you would hope initially. I think ultimately, because of our limitations to AI, I think it would be scripted a little bit more than I think we would like, to be able to place ourselves inside of a movie, and maybe those avatars that are interacting with you aren't really interacting, they're just going off of a script, and it's up to you whether you want to.
The script though could base off of certain actions or certain words that you say. It could probably follow up on that.
Correct.
Okay, let's go move out. Let's do this.
We're already assuming a very advanced AI anyhow that can do changes like that, allowing for ad-libbing and you to make changes by your actions into what's going on.
Right, which would definitely be.
Oh, that'd be pretty fun though too. You could enhance characters in your movies, like you said. Not make Anakin so emo-ish. I could make Hudson a little more tougher in Aliens. I could have Drake not get acid faced. I can make sure that doesn't happen. You could, the whole rewriting of the story would be fun, and it also make it different. It's not the exact same thing, and then each time you do it,
or even being able to place yourself within the world,
that too,
within a fantasy world.
But we're just talking basically on a level of changing scripts that only can be touched on in video games right now. We're talking about a level of insertion which we're only starting to basically we had with IMAX first, the concept of inserting yourself, and now virtual reality is trying to catch up. So perfection on these concepts really is what we're seeing here.
I think we're at a unique time in history where we're seeing these technologies be applied to each other in ways that we've never really been able to do before, because they're all at a certain stage where they can be unified in order to create some of these things. And I think it's not as fantastic to believe that these are possible within our lifetime. Certainly
things that are getting us closer. The force fields and the replicators.
Right.
There was one thing.
Well, if you even look at 3D printing, I mean, some people say that that's replication. Well, it's not replication, but it could be replication's redheaded stepchild.
And if you've been following 3D printing, you know that that's already increased by leaps and bounds
Correct.
over what its infancy was. So
I believe
while it's still very primitive yet, it's a very exciting technology to follow up on.
I believe Japan did a tofu thing where the 3D printed it to look like a hamburger or something like that. I don't know.
But it was made out of tofu. Well,
it's edible too. So
right.
look, I got my burger.
Ultimately, that would be matter to matter conversion. Where
Yes.
holodecks would be energy to matter, which is something that's the fantastical part of it.
Correct.
Tell you that tofu probably smells better than that fish I bought at Walmart yesterday.
Anyhow, moving onward. So we talked about all of the positives that could be capable in our society and how our society would change from Star Trek. Let's talk about the dark sides, because from what we've seen, there's a small element of danger when the plot requires it in Star Trek, with the safeties off or when something goes wrong. But theoretically, you could go in a holodeck 10,000 times and never have a hiccup, and this is tried and true technology. But another thing Star Trek isn't the best at some of the levels is talking about things like mental illness, talking about other dangers. And if we have unlimited access or even limited access to this technology, there's definitely going to be some dark sides that we would end up facing. We've already kind of touched on, the porn industry has definitely some issues going on there. We're not going to delve into, but
stalking issues, if you think about it,
recreating other people in your life.
Yeah, like people
Yeah.
that people that you can't have a relationship with, let's say,
And Star Trek has touched on that with Barclay, definitely, where rather than interacting with people in your own society, you recreate them in a safe setting.
That's right, because
but people would not do a safe setting in a lot of these.
Oh, a lot of these, yeah,
too.
you're correct. I mean, to use it as retribution, or I just don't care for that character. I'm going to kill him.
You recreate
even
your
worse.
work life, and
Exactly.
You're like, oh, or it could be one or two things. It could be one where you
could have a
get the
postal
manager
scenario.
fired, supervisor fired, and you're the hero of the workplace,
Right.
or you got that supervisor that in your holodeck fantasy comes up to you. You are such an amazing worker. Wow, I wish everybody could be like you.
And that's
and then they just
definitely the
repeat that all the
possibility.
time.
And that's the safe side of this, ladies
Yeah.
and gentlemen. There's a lot worse scenarios that we could come up
Where
with.
people just kind of end up retreating into their fantasies,
Mhm.
and that's definitely would not be something that you would want to happen with this technology.
Yeah.
But definitely a direction that people could take.
Yeah, we talked about it being used for therapy, but if it's used to continually coddle thoughts of revenge, thoughts of violence, and things like that, if it's unsupervised, that could really be a dangerous spark for the wrong kind of personalities.
And honestly, I think that would lend itself to the idea that this technology is limited.
I
to
think
certain
the
people.
computer-
I think it would be regulated to the point where, much like a dram shop law, you get a 2-drink minimum. You can't. All right, we've seen you 3 times this week. You need to lay off the holodeck.
Holodeck license. You need to qualify for a holodeck license.
To be able
and
to,
then they can monitor, and every time you go in, you have to...
Just like exercising your right to bear arms. You
Yeah.
still have to go through training. You still have to prove that you are of the capacity to be able to do this. People who have a propensity to use this technology inappropriately would probably be prohibited from using it.
Right. Barclay, he wasn't doing any harm to his fantasy world and the thing, but I would think that a computer would set off some sort of signals to the appropriate people if somebody was creating a fantasy world where they're doing violence upon real life coworkers or people.
Sort of like a red flag situation. Yeah.
I would think you would totally need that, especially today. I mean,
Today, you would definitely need that because you would have the stalking situation or the retributive type situations where people want to take real life people and constantly do harm or other unmentionable things to them.
Well, I mean, can you imagine the movie Saw? How that would be really horrific if somebody had a functional holodeck with no safety.
Well, see, here's the thing too. What's to say that you don't? Let's say we do allow that terms of therapy.
That'd be something
to be able to interact with these.
I like horror films,
avatars.
So I would love the idea of being in, let's say, Friday the 13th, as a character. As long as the safeties are on. I with my luck, that's when the safeties don't work, and I'll be like,
if the safeties are on, that would, people like scaring themselves. Some people enjoy horrific scenarios and stuff, and what would like to see what they could do, what their limits are.
There's a scary prospect of role playing in which, if you are actually choosing to role play in this fashion, is that indicative of something deeper within your own psyche?
Oh, I didn't say I was going to be Jason. I just said I'd be in I'd be the cop.
He'd be the kid.
There is no
the idea behind,
I'm
going to go in here and I'm in a slasher comedy and I'm just going to kill a bunch of people. To even want to engage in that kind of behavior would seem to be a red flag to me.
Sure.
Or
at least a yellow flag.
It would be something
There'd have
discuss.
to be gradients.
If you're doing that movie every week, then there'd be like, okay.
Or you have very specific demands on who the people are. Maybe the computer would automatically, because of the nature, shuffle people so they're not recognizable. So you can't live out fantasies against a particular person.
We're talking about a leap.
I think that would not allow you to choose. Like, let's say if you're on the Enterprise playing, let's say, a Friday the 13th.
I can't be Jason in a movie full of David Spade.
And let's say you're like, you want to be the killer. You want to be Jason. You just want to lumber around. The computer probably would not allow you to choose. Captain Picard. I want Riker over here. I want Troy there. It probably wouldn't allow you to do that. It'd probably have to take a shuffle from, let's say, it'd probably take people who were passed beyond, and like if they would just take their likeness from the movies, let's just say, and then just that's who they would shuffle in those scenarios.
And I have to believe it would. The computer would leave an interesting report for the counselor.
Yeah.
For you, possibly to the point where the computer would just say, "Why did you just sit here and wait for the medical team to come?"
It is a military organization. Those kind of things are studied and regulated, and reports are made constantly.
Yeah,
not we make reports constantly in even today's society.
Sure,
where the owners of the proprietary technology would still have to study the effects on people. And again, that goes back to what I was saying with, if you're choosing to engage in this kind of behavior. When it's a video game, when it's Halo, when it's Grand Theft Auto, we can hide behind the fact that it's a two-dimensional kind of cartoonish realm. But even there, we're looking at the possibility of, if you're engaging in this behavior, not saying that, well, the video game made me do it. I'm not. That's more of an obtuse idea behind it. But people who do transfer that behavior to life. Mm-hmm. That would be a risk that you would probably see that happening more prevalently, especially since they're acting out these scenes physically rather than just, in a video game society.
Interesting, though, that they'd be doing that in a holodeck where it can be watched rather than, say, going onto a balcony of a hotel and shooting a bunch of people in real life. So in a way, that kind of goes. It's dark. But it does kind of go to the therapy thing and
it could be
lethal.
Cathartic in some way to be able to experience that in a safe setting like that. Mm-hmm. I can definitely see that.
Perhaps that person would really want to be working closely with a counselor, saying, I just want to do this,
right,
and maybe address it. Okay, so
they might not even allow you to be the killer in the story. They might.
There may be some limitations to which characters you can.
You could still be in Friday the 13th, but guess what? You cannot be Jason or Nightmare on Elm Street. You cannot be. But where they might let you do something where you're the bad guy would be, let's say you're in Aliens and you're Carter Burke. You're the slimy company guy. So you're kind of like doing like not necessarily.
Nah, you're Ronnie Cox in every movie that Ronnie Cox is in.
Well, he played good guys for a while until he did RoboCop, but even so, you could be the challenge of the game. If you're in Aliens, being the company man, your challenge is trying to get the alien at any means possible, and that's the role.
No, even deeper. Your goal is to make money and cut costs, and you are graded on how much profit you can end up making out of this mess.
When you're playing Command and Conquer, who chooses the commies?
Nod? Or you're talking about Red Alert? Red Alert.
What I'm saying is that,
the commies have some pretty good stuff, man.
They do, but that choice that you make is indicative of your psychology.
To a point. I think most gamers want to explore both sides.
And I think that's a possibility, but I think there is some question as to say, why are you choosing to be Freddy Krueger? Why are you choosing to be Jason? Why are you choosing to be the slimy weasel?
Some people just want to watch the world burn.
The aspect of the game, I'm choosing the slimy weasel because I was Ripley the last time. Now I'm changing the aspect to see what I can do as a challenge for this one.
And I can
Challenge
see
is
that.
pretty big on
I
that,
can
too.
see that. My thoughts are that in this day and age in our society, that we would go to that negative aspect so quickly.
Yeah.
We would just
it would be crowded for the people who want to get in on that side.
It would just the situation that you have in Saw or Hostel even.
Yeah.
Hostel is probably even a more analogy where the people are brought in for this experience and you pay for that experience. And I think that would be the norm rather than the exception.
For a certain segment of society, again.
And I think it would be very prevalent.
I think also we've touched on holodeck addiction. I think we've already discussed that there would have to be some kind of limits. Otherwise, people would spend, think how much, people get obsessed with video games today. The stories of people dying because they didn't take enough bathroom breaks playing World of Warcraft. Now you're playing something even more immersive that you have even more control over. I think that just kind of goes hand in hand.
Even more into it.
We'd have a lot of people doing that. That's obviously a dark side. I don't think we really need to explore it. We can all imagine how that would be. We all know people who have obsessive personalities and addictions of their own, and just all the more so. That pleasure center in the brain would get rubbed an awful lot in that kind of gratification of anything that you want happening.
To saying, there must be some sort of desensitization that must occur in the Star Trek universe to keep these people from actually becoming addicted to these
that hormone therapy, I'm telling you, man. Plus, also, you have to remember, out of billions and maybe trillions of people by this time, they've all been screened to be the best of the best of the best. So the people who are least likely to have these. So we are not seeing a broad cross-section in the Enterprise. But Deep Space Nine, I think, is a lot more indicative of a more useful cross-sampling of what we're talking about. Because if there was a holodeck, somebody would find a way to turn off those limits and have private servers so that you could indulge all of this stuff that we're talking about.
Right.
And probably those people are going to be the really rich people who can afford to have their own private servers and do whatever they want and play God. So I guess the final thing, and this, again, bringing it back to what Neil was talking about in human interaction, isn't there kind of a danger that if this became really prevalent, if everybody has a private holodeck, then social interactions could really dry up, because then you don't have to deal with anybody who's a problem. You'd be in your own safe world. All of your interactions go exactly the way you want them to.
Choose which people to interact with.
Would I be able to create a scenario in which everything is a snowflake and I am also a snowflake?
Yes. So, yeah, you could...
That would be the ultimate safe space, I think.
Perhaps. The problem with snowflakes, though, is that they insist on their own specialness, and that can rub up against your specialness.
Yes, they are quite unique amongst themselves.
Yes. So, the whole idea that the best population control we have going right now is Fortnite. I've heard it said. In that, if you get something immersive enough, people will stop interacting with other people and doing the kind of things that form society, as opposed to shooting at visual representations of other parts of society. Thoughts?
Agreed.
Does that sound valid?
Yeah, I think
it's you can see population levels dropping rapidly.
I
people
think that people find that it's easier to create a realm for themselves that they can advance and grow in electronically rather than physically. I mean, people will pursue, EVE Online is a big business where people spend a lifetime earning actual money, earning actual achievements, rather than going out and getting a job and becoming, the real CEO of a real company. I think you have this issue in our society where people are choosing the virtual realm over the physical realm. And I think when you merge that together with a holodeck, you have some serious social issues to discuss, because now you're in the virtual realm, but it's even more real because you have a tactile response to it.
One of the things that blew me away with the end of Ready Player One was the very last bit. He's like, yeah, we shut this whole thing down on Tuesdays and Thursdays because personal interaction is important too. I thought that blew my mind, actually. That it's you have some happy endings. Like, yeah, this really, really got some people mad. I'm like, Yeah. You think people get mad now just because they have to go to the Epic Store to download their game rather than Steam?
Or
Holy cow!
or
How
it's
did you
Tuesday.
survive that?
It's Tuesday patch day and I can't play for 4 hours.
Right. Oh gosh.
And it's such a, or the internet is out, and that's indicative of the addictions that they're having, that they're able to and have that instant gratification to be able to enter into their realm instantly.
When you play online and you hear kids get all mad at the game, or not just kids, but adults,
Where they rage,
where they get upset, where they're losing, and you're like, just a game, and I think that goes into the whole reality thing. Like, you're in your little virtual reality where you want control, but you know what? When you're not winning, you're not having control because your control that you're trying to do is not working. You know what I mean? Because
you're not going to have all of society suffering from this type of behavior. I think there are people who have a psychology that would definitely give them a propensity to be addicted to these things, as we all have a propensity to be addicted to certain things. We all have that, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pornography, whether it's holodection. I mean, video games or holodeck, it really is just an extension of that technology. But I think the danger is even greater there because of that sort of the ability to interact physically with that and to be able to bring in elements from the outside world at will, at command, and to be, like you said, to be able to control that universe. I mean, I've been playing video games as long as I've been alive. I mean, I had a Nintendo when I was 5 years old. And ultimately, they begin to lose their draw once you realize that you have absolutely no control in that universe any more than you have control of your own universe. And I think...
Well, at least in a video game, you can save the world. You can save the princess. Here, you can get fired if you get just a little bit lippy with the wrong person. That there is a lot more wish fulfillment in the video game, at least.
That's probably why single stories for holodeck work better than online play, maybe.
Yeah, because...
Well, I mean, at times that they'll just leave something running continuously to be able to go in and interact and leave at will. And the idea of having like a Las Vegas scenario, which is what was touched upon, constantly running to where you can leave and come back and so forth. I think that would actually be more realistic in a safer setting, to where you have these pre-created controlled settings and environments that are running and are available for you to interact with. Like, go into our World War II scenario, go into our 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea scenario. More like a theme park rather than a novel's experience. More like reading a book. I think it would be more like a public experience, like a theme park. Would be the safest way to have it in our society.
And speaking of theme parks, the last one that I came up with to address is the dangers of personal appropriation, where a person's identity is iconically theirs, and some people really have a problem with other people being able to reproduce them and doing things with that representation. I think today, with so much import on, personal boundaries and things that we really, kind of put in place and need, with the holodeck, that becomes problematic, especially when you think about private ones that wouldn't be regulated. But even regulated ones, there would definitely need to be some boundaries in place there in today's society. Agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think, obviously you would have proprietary concerns of story making, but even still with Fortnite, I guess there's a lawsuit going on because Carlton saw somebody dancing like Carlton.
No, it's because a lawyer told him, hey, somebody's using this move and I think we can get some money out of it.
It is true, and that definitely would happen. But think about it. Is there nothing more iconic to that actor than that dance?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the actor, but here's the thing.
Yeah, I'm just saying that ultimately there are certain aspects that even in a fantasy situation, we would extend our own personality to that.
What I'm more talking about is, okay, the computer contacts me and says, okay, this user over in Uzbekistan created an image of you and performed an act upon, this image. And then what would you like to do, and so on and so forth.
That would
comes
definitely
out.
happen in our society. And oddly enough,
the more popular you are, the more this is going to happen and need to be controlled.
It obviously was completely uncontrolled in Star Trek because it happened so many times where people were recreating actual people.
Yeah, that Barclay thing sounded very red flag-ish.
Red flag-ish, yeah. I mean, he's probably experiencing intimate contact with some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
He's recreating them, and he creates somebody he's afraid of 2 feet shorter than he normally is, just so that he doesn't feel as intimidated by this individual.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody created for the purpose of intellectual study,
mm-hmm.
and it becomes a romantic situation, simply because the computer has attached a personality to these interactable people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely not how it was intended to be in the first place, but it continued.
Yeah.
But there's seemingly no regulation against that occurring
in Star Trek.
Yeah. I absolutely believe that would be really strongly controlled in society today if we had that.
Well, one thing I don't think there's any doubt that if this technology suddenly, boom,
unless
okay,
you signed a waiver, like you're on the Star Trek Enterprise or anything for Starfleet for that matter, and they got their little tablet device, and you read it and it says, I will consent my likeness to be used in holodeck programs to help further the experience.
Even then, the AI, I think, would still flag it.
I think the storytelling never progressed to that point to understand that there would be an issue there.
Well, we are inventing whole new topics that Star Trek never did, but that's why we're doing this.
Well, yeah, our society is continuing to grow and progress even beyond what Star Trek has touched upon.
That's
and
true.
I think that's part of the reason why there's a discussion.
So, certainly the lawyers would have a field day if this technology came out. As a matter of fact, if it came out tomorrow, we probably wouldn't be able to touch it for 20 years while they figure out what we can and can't do. That's my prepared stuff. You guys have any other thoughts on this?
What made me think of doing a holodeck episode was that night that we came to your house, Rob, to play, what's that game called again?
Massive Darkness.
Massive Darkness.
Yes.
Now, you had the lighting, like the lights were dim, and you had like this like little dungeon.
My butt, it covered my whole table. It was awesome.
This gigantic table that we're sitting on, and it was to help with the role playing experience that you get your little characters and you put them in this dungeon that you put together with like mazes and doors or whatever.
Yep.
And even though it was just the size of the table, it felt like you're like, wow, this almost looks like you could
place
be there.
Yourself into that.
Yeah, because you could physically see the representation of the walls and the doors and all that stuff. And then, of course, when you get the monster cards, you bring like the 3D monster and set it out. And, that got me thinking, how would this play in a holodeck?
It would be great. I think that would be, in a perfect world, that would be a real joyful experience. To be able to entertained by, a role-playing setting. Whatever the role-playing setting. It doesn't have to be demons and darkness, but it could be anything.
Yeah.
Tokyo Bubblegum Schoolgirl Pop episode. Sure.
Let's not bring Japanese entertainment into this.
I've actually played in that role-playing game before, though, and it's okay.
But I was thinking like, and we watched how Star Trek does their holodecks. Would the gameplay be the same, where you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, and then would there be like a holodeck dice or something that you would shake, and the numbers would appear in front of you, and then that would determine if you get hit or if you take hits. And since there are safety protocols, and say the safety's on, but it'll let you feel a little
more like a
jolt.
laser tag situation.
You can feel like a little jolt. So let's say the nasty unicorn takes a shot at you, and you really feel like when you lose 7 hearts or whatever, you get 7 little jolts, and you can really
Okay, well, here's a few problems I'd have with that. Number one, you're taking out the immersion by implementing a very arbitrary mechanic like these dice. I think part of the whole thing with the holodeck is you want to feel like you're there and that you're doing things rather than just be the king on the chessboard moving and suffering the slings and arrows.
The idea of the holodeck is to take the mathematical portion out of it.
Okay, so then instead of rolling the dice, then we could each take a shot at the creatures. They all the minions come out. We each have, like, I was the bow guy, right? I was the bow guy.
So you have a bow.
I had better at a distance, so I could take the bow, shoot, get him down at the same time. When
the computer would extrapolate that within the own realm. So let's say you shot it and then you rolled zeros, rolled ones, whatever. You would miss.
You would actually watch your arrow fly off.
Or a random event would deflect it.
And we could do this where I would be running the game, so I would be invisible to you, but I'd be able to see everything that you do. So if I, at the part of, say, the game, if there are, artificial rules we're using, I would draw a card from out of the air because it's cool. And I would look at the monster, and I would look at where you are, and I would throw the card up in the air. It would disappear, and I would gesture, and the monsters would suddenly just jump out. They'd crawl up from under tiles on the floor. They'd leap out of shadows, and then you guys would have to deal with that.
For some reason, I have the image of Hervé Villachet in The Man with the Golden Gun constantly making mannequins and mirrors pop out of somewhere, just at random. And within Star Trek, I think there's the idea behind external manipulation of a concurrent program, that there are sometimes people running a program, physically manipulating the program, external from the program, for the enjoyment of people. And again, entertainment-wise, I think that's...
And a lot of what we've already discussed too, the uniqueness of an experience in entertainment makes that experience the more valuable in a society and in a circumstance where you can literally experience anything you can dream up. Experiencing what someone else dreams up makes the experience richer as a result because you're uniquely enjoying that experience. If you guys were down here in my basement playing a role-playing game, that's something that only we are experiencing. You guys are getting the benefit of my undivided attention revealing a story that you don't know, but you are participating in. And I am getting the experience of you guys playing the major characters, and I don't know where the story is going to go because you have that element of narrative control. That's the whole allure of role-playing games to me, at least a big portion of it.
And I think that would be ultimately the baseline idea behind Holodecks.
Yep. It's just, the question is, again, do you want to do something where there's arbitrary controls, or do you want to rely on how cool you yourself are?
Sims Holodecks. You ever play Sims, guys?
I played The Sims.
Yeah. Could you imagine what people do with that too?
I would
take the door away.
I would get to the point where I would just keep making gnomes over and over again.
No, not gnomes. No.
Gnomes, 300 gnomes, and just clicky, clicky, clicky. That's the best way to make money in that game.
Oh,
just make gnomes over and over and over again.
Gnomes?
Yeah, gnomes.
Like
you just
the
gnomes.
creepy little things that are
just gnomes. You would just have them make gnomes. Don't let them go to the bathroom. They just, leak.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was, at that point, I think I put the game away.
That gnome, you have a gnome down here. It's like a zombie.
I have several gnomes.
That's not a scary gnome, though. The zombie gnomes aren't scary.
They weren't scary.
I got one without an arm that's kind of creepy looking.
Well, that's...
Those are my wife's, by the way.
So yes.
Okay, so is that what you're holding as an example of an awesome thing that you would do with Holodeck if you could?
Yeah, because it would be that would be the prime thing. Like a role-playing game would be prime. And of course, just like you mentioned, it would be altered a little bit to fit the new technology, but I think all the mechanics for the gameplay would still be there.
Sure, absolutely. See, my idea of the perfect, if I had access to the holodeck and I could do with it as I will, I would sell on the experience. And in this case, I would do something that you can't recreate with scientific or means. I would create a fantasy medieval scenario. I would have concurrent storylines and plot lines and characters in place for the players to interact with who have their own perspective and stories that this technology can do. But I would also have, packets of things like to do spells. You do a particular gesture and you'd be able to just quickly hold out your hand and bring up a spell book and be able to look and do things and create magic. or and we would also incorporate some of this chaos element so that if you have the big sword and everything, sometimes the holodeck is going to cheat, make you slip or make that blow not land because you're not that experienced yet. And the more you play in my world, the cooler and better you get, till eventually the computer is you're designing an attack and the computer makes it more effective, or the monster less. When you incorporate that you can eat in the game and you can hear the music and it would be incredible.
The environmental.
It would be
aspect.
incredible. You never want to leave my city.
You know, in the Dead Rising game, I think that's what the game's called, where it's in the mall.
Yes,
that was
Dead
the
Rising.
first time I played a game where your character could pick up a variety of weapons, and if you picked up that sledgehammer, that sledgehammer had weight to it, so your character would kind of fall back a little bit with it, and the swings that you would take were not that powerful. They were, but because the thing was heavy, your character would draw forward a little bit. You know, he didn't have as much control with it.
Very few games go to that level of realism with things like that. Was one of the draws of that game.
And in the other game, you play Doom, you can hold 5,000 guns that you got, including
6 guns.
6 monster guns, like literally gigantic things. And if you had that game didn't have a sledgehammer, but if you had
had a chainsaw.
But if you had a sledgehammer, well, guess what? It would have the same weight as your tiny little knife that you might have.
Well, the idea of the Doom guy is that he's this massively muscle marine, so he'd be able to handle the weight a bit better than your average person. But yeah, that chainsaw doesn't feel very visceral until you play the new Doom game. Then it gets pretty.
Well, I bet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
lots of fun.
Advancing.
So, Neil, what would you do with a holodeck?
I am quite boring. I do believe that I would probably recreate historical events, or even just locales, maybe in ancient Egypt or ancient Greece. I think I would like to explore, even though it wouldn't be realistic. Well, it would be realistic, but it wouldn't be like verbatim what it actually looked like. Obviously, it would be a recreation, but I think I would enjoy placing myself into there.
I want to go to Egypt, ancient Egypt. Make it like the aliens were giving us technology. I want to do that route.
Computer, take me to ancient Nordic society. I'd like to see the recreation of this particular scene in mythology. Now that would be kind of exciting.
I would like to do that. That's how would that I think humans have been finding new ways to tell each other stories since we've just been sitting around a fire hoping that we don't get mauled by a tiger. I think this is just an extension of storytelling, just a newer technological version of it, and I think it could be used, as very, very fun. I think it would be very fun for us to use
it'd be mind-blowing.
I my favorite kind of movie is a period movie. I love
Carrie?
No, Dave. No. I'm speaking more of the lines of
yes, I know.
Of movies set in a specific time and place, much like Titanic.
Oh, yes. Yep. Takes place in 1997 and 1912.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's I think we've covered just about everything about holodecks that in our society that we really need to cover. Thank you, Neil, for coming over and helping us out as our resident Trek-spert.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
Hopefully, you'll be able to come for more of these as we move on. And yes, for those of you listening at home, this has been another example of where podcasts can take you in an infinite setting. And hopefully next time you will join us again when we return back to the podcast with Dave and Rob.
And Neil.
And maybe next time, Neil.